Far back in the mists of ancient time, or roughly 30 or so years ago, in the space year 1993, DC Comics and Byron Preiss thought it would be a mostly harmless idea to adapt Douglas Adams's wholly remarkable sci-fi comedy novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, into a series of comic books. They were not well received, least of all by the guide's original author, who felt that the comics somewhat Americanized his rather British work. 2 further series were published, adapting Adams's second 2 novels, with unsurprising diminishing returns. However, this is not their story. That may well be a topic for a future video, but you guys know how I work by now, so expect it sometime around 2025. This is the story of the baffling set of trading cards released in 1994 based off the comic adaptations of the first novel. The set featured around 100 cards, and for the main part, retold in bite-sized chunks, the story of that wholly remarkable book, as well as some other bits of ephemera, some of which devised purely for the set. So it is with great pride that I present, with great thanks to the H2G2 Scrapbook Twitter account, whose posting of these cards inspired me to do this video, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as retold by the trading card set, and then the remaining 50 odd cards collected into sections. Mr. Prosser arrives to supervise the demolition of Arthur Dent's house to make way for a new local bypass. A complete surprise to Arthur. Arthur takes a stand, or rather a lie down. Mr. Prosser tries to reason. Mr. Dent, do you know how much damage the bulldozer would suffer if I let it roll straight over you? None at all. By a curious coincidence, none at all is exactly how much suspicion Arthur had that one of his closest friends, Ford Prefect, is in fact from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Beetlejuice, and not from Guildford, as he usually claims. Ford arrives and whisks Arthur off to the local pub to tell him something of great importance. Arthur is not thrilled to leave his house in the hands of Mr. Prosser, but Ford is insistent. He orders 3 pints of bitters, each for himself and a terminally confused Arthur. Ford, he asks, would you please tell me what's going on? Arthur demands an explanation from Ford as to what exactly is going on. Ford asks how Arthur would react if he were to tell him that he's not actually from Guildford, but rather a small planet in the vicinity of Beetlejuice. Arthur's response? Why, is that the sort of thing you're likely to say? Arthur Dent is thoroughly confused. His house is about to be demolished, and his best friend, Ford Prefect, has just told him that he's actually an alien and not from Guildford, and, further, that the world is about to end. Arthur's response? This must be a Thursday. I never could get the hang of Thursdays. The arrival of the alien Vogon constructor fleet, charged with demolishing the Earth to make way for a new hyperspatial bypass, goes unnoticed at all of Earth's sensitive tracking stations. However, it does register on the small black device known as a sub-ether sensormatic, which is inside of Ford Prefect's satchel. When Ford Prefect pays the bill for the 6 pints of bitters, he gives the bartender all of his money, lending credence to Ford's claim that the Earth is about to be destroyed. The bartender asks if anything can be done for it. Ford tells him no, and the bartender realizes there is only one thing left to do. Call for last orders. Contrary to its name, the Vogon fleet is in the destruction business, specifically planetary demolition. This is well suited to their nature, as the Vogons are some of the nastiest, crankiest, ill-mannered, ill-tempered and dumbest beings in the civilized universe. For more on this, see the guide entries and Vogon subsets. A Vogon constructor fleet destroys the Earth to make room for a new hyperspatial bypass. All pleas for mercy are disregarded by prostetnic Vogon Jelts of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council, since the demolition orders have been on display for the last 50 years at our local planning department in Alpha Centauri. Meanwhile, on the planet of Damagran, A long way from the smouldering remains of Earth, Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox arrives at the ceremony for the unveiling of an amazingly amazing new spaceship, the Heart of Gold. In fact, the ship is so amazingly amazing that Zaphod drops a paralyze-o-matic bomb and steals it. Moments before the destruction of Earth, Ford Prefect is able to hitch a ride for Arthur and himself aboard one of the Vogon ships. Ford explains that the ship's cooks, the Dentrassi, took them aboard. Arthur is understandably confused. So Ford offers him an electronic book with the helpful words, "Don't panic," printed on the cover. Ford shows Arthur an entry on the Vogons in the Hitchhiker'S Guide. The bit about the Dentrassi now being employed as cooks and welcoming hitchhikers isn't in it, however. Ford explains that it is his job to do the field research for the new revised edition, and that this is one of the pieces of information he will include. A seasoned hitchhiker, Ford knows there must be a babelfish stored in the galley. The babelfish, once inserted into a person's ear, acts as a universal translator, which is a good thing, for at that moment, the Vogon captain is announced that he's discovered the presence of the hitchhikers and intends to throw them off the ship. Arthur questions Ford about the Hitchhiker's Guide. If you're a researcher for this book and you were on Earth, you must have been gathering material for it. Ford admits that he was able to extend the original entry a bit and punches it up for Arthur. The original entry reads, "Earth, harmless." The new entry, "Earth, mostly harmless." The hitchhikers have been discovered. The galley door is being opened from the outside. Ford explains to Arthur that if they're lucky, it's just some Vogons come to throw them out into space. And if they're unlucky? Arthur inquires. If they're unlucky, Ford confesses, the captain might want to read them some of his poetry first. To forestall their certain deaths, Ford and Arthur go to great lengths to compliment the Vogon captain's particularly wretched poetry. However, when they tell him that he writes poetry because underneath his mean, callous, heartless exterior, he just wants to be loved, he disagrees and decides to throw them off the ship immediately. Ford and Arthur try their best to talk the Vogon guard out of tossing them through the spaceship's airlock. Ford's opening gambit is, "Do you really enjoy this sort of thing?" Since shouting, "Resistance is useless," is one of the guard's main duties, and since he's particularly good at it, this tack does not work. Ford and Arthur get the Vogon guard to attempt to think about the limitations of his job, which consist of stamping around, throwing people off spaceships, and shouting. It doesn't work. "You see, if I keep it up, I can eventually get promoted to Senior Shouting Officer." He promptly throws them through the airlock. Arthur now realizes that his and Ford's predicament might lead to imminent death, especially when Ford explains that a lungful of air will keep a person alive in space for about 30 seconds before dying of asphyxiation. Arthur has but a few moments to bemoan his fate before the airlock opens and they are cast into space. 29 seconds after they're tossed off the Vogon ship, Arthur and Ford are rescued. "Bright idea of mine, to find a passing spaceship and get rescued by it," Ford tells Arthur. Of course, given the size of space, vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big, according to the guide, the odds against it were astronomical. Ford and Arthur may be on a spaceship, but it's the strangest spaceship Ford's ever seen. Reality keeps changing around them at a frantic pace, shifting from one impossible scenario to another. When it begins raining fish and donuts, Ford finally admits that there's something very strange going on. An announcement over the ship's intercom reveals that Ford and Arthur have been picked up by the Heart of Gold, an amazingly amazing spaceship powered by the Infinite Improbability Drive. Just how vastly improbable is brought home to Arthur when an infinite number of monkeys approach him to look at their script for Hamlet. Zaphod Beeblebrox, captain of the stolen Heart of Gold, asks his pilot, stroke navigator, stroke girlfriend, Trillian, why she picked up two stray hitchhikers. However, the ship itself picked them up at an improbability factor of 2 to the power of 267,709 to 1 against, which happens to be Arthur's phone number in his now demolished Islington flat. Zaphod's concerned about the hitchhikers, so Trillian decides to send the robot, Marvin, the paranoid android down to find them. With a brain the size of a planet, but only menial tasks to take care of, it's no wonder that Marvin is clinically depressed. If only he wouldn't keep talking about it and depressing everyone else. Marvin trundles down to the cargo bay in search of the two hitchhikers. He finds them and immediately begins to complain about his job. Ford asks which government owns the ship, and Marvin reveals that no one does. That in fact the ship was stolen by one Zaphod Beeblebrox. At the mention of his name, Ford is visibly shaken. Taken to the bridge of the Heart of Gold by Marvin, Ford sees a familiar face. "Zaphod, great to see you. The extra arm suits. Nice ship you've stolen." He introduces Arthur to Zaphod, but it seems they've already met at a party on Earth.
See cards 84 to 87 for the excruciating details.
Now is revealed the reason for the theft of the Heart of Gold and its infinite improbability drive, to reach the most improbable planet in the universe, Magrathea. Ford dismisses it as a myth, but just wait until he turns around. Magrathea, the home of custom-made planet building to the richest men in the galaxy. A planet so successful that it reduced the rest of the galaxy to abject poverty. The Empire collapsed, the planet disappeared, and its memory soon passed into obscurity. Until now. Why, it's an ages-old recorded message from the Commercial Council of Magrathea. First, it thanks our heroes for their interest, then asks them to leave a message. Then asks them just to leave. And then... Oh, have we mentioned the missiles yet? Yes, guided missiles, armed with nuclear warheads, courtesy of an ancient, annoyingly polite Magrathean defense system, have been set to destroy our friends on the Heart of Gold, and no one can fly the ship. Is this the end of our heroes? Probably. A fantastic explosion of noise and light that can only mean one thing. In desperation, Arthur has turned on the infinite improbability drive. Sure, anything could happen, but that's much better than getting hit by a big old nasty nuclear missiles, wouldn't you say? As is wont to happen when the improbability drive is activated, one of the two missiles, threatening our friends, has suddenly become a very surprised sperm whale. What's the fate of the second missile?
See card 34 for the answer.
It's a pretty neat thing to come into existence as a sperm whale several miles above an alien planet. You get to come up with names for your tail. The wind running past you, and the ground, which is very quickly approaching. Oh no. Not again. If we knew why the newly transformed bowl of petunias, formerly a large nuclear missile threatening the Heart of Gold, thought this as it fell to the surface of Magrathea, we'd know a lot more about the nature of the universe than we do now. Anything can happen when the infinite improbability drive is activated. Lead can turn into gold, missiles into petunias, and spaceship interiors can undergo surprisingly fetching interior design. Our heroes now make their way to Magrathea in a tasteful conservatory setting. Arthur, Zaphod, Ford, Trillian, and Marvin find themselves on the surface of Magrathea. Barren, but for a pulverized petunia bowl and a burst whale. Did the surface become too polluted or overpopulated? Asks Arthur. No, replies Ford. They just didn't like it very much. Nil plus 4 being, of course, Magrathea's new population. At least that's what Zaphod assures Trillian of, as the two of them, accompanied by Ford, venture into the bowels of the planet, courtesy of a convenient whale-made crater. That's what they'd like to think, isn't it?
My name is not important.
This, from a mysterious figure appearing out of thin air. It's none other than one of the planet makers of Magrathea. Excuse me, Arthur asks him. What is your name, by the way?
My name is Slarty Bartfast.
Slarty Bartfast? I told you it wasn't important. Here, Arthur discovers that the Magratheans are building a second version of Earth in a vast tract of hyperspace. Arthur also learns that his planet was commissioned, paid for, and run by mice, and that it was destroyed 5 minutes before its purpose was fulfilled. Here, through the miracle of sensotape, Arthur learns of Deep Thought, the second most powerful computer in the universe, created by beings from another dimension. It took Deep Thought 7.5 million years to discover the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. The day of the answer has arrived. The masses, descendants of the original philosophers who initiated the question, line the city square, led by official witnesses Lunqual and Fouche.
See card 63.
And the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. This is the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
I think the problem, to be quite honest, is that you've never actually known what the question is,
explains Deep Thought. It then designs the immense organic computer necessary to produce the question, a computer called the Earth. Meanwhile, Zaphod awakens to find himself, Ford, and Trillian in a waiting room that serves as a Magrathean planet catalogue.
See cards 96 to 99.
Finally, the Magratheans and their rodential clients have chosen to deal with them. Our cast is reunited with Trillian's mice.
See card 61.
At a beautifully set dinner table. Here, the mice explain that there is no need to build another Earth, as they now have a native of the planet who left seconds before it was destroyed, Arthur. Wherein Arthur discovers that the ultimate question of the universe may well be encoded in the structure of his brain, but in order to decode it, the brain must be removed, prepared, treated, diced. Arthur, needless to say, becomes quite upset. As Arthur has no fondness whatsoever for the notion of having his brain diced, he turns down the mice's offer. This, in turn, prompts them to call upon a large Magrathean mob squad, clad in surgical garb, to perform the uninvited extraction. Emergency! Blast the klaxons throughout Magrathea. Hostile ship has landed on planet, armed intruders in section 8A. While our heroes use the confusion to escape the mice, what do but run smack dab into said intruders? What's the probability of that happening? Arthur, Ford, Trillian and Zaphod meet their new pursuers, a pair of fully armed, horribly liberal cops. One admits to agonizing over his gratuitous killing to his girlfriend, the other writes novels. And they're set on taking our heroes in, dead or suitably bruised. There are some things you have to do even if you are an enlightened liberal cop who knows all about sensitivity and everything, bemoan the cops before letting loose another withering barrage of fire. Little by little, the makeshift shield protecting our heroes disintegrates. Until, suddenly, the barrage stops. Our heroes hear two thuds. Ford goes to check it out. Isn't anyone going to say, "No, you can't, let me go instead?" To discover two dead cops with exploded life support systems. Curious. Taking a gun from the now dead liberal cops, Zaphod leads our crew to the surface, stopping needlessly to blast the occasional computer bank along the way. They pick up a suitably depressed Marvin and head back to the Heart of Gold. Finally, Ford, Trillian, Arthur and Zaphod are aboard the Heart of Gold, safe and sound. And hungry. With that in mind, they take off for the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Soon to become an exquisitely produced trading card set, perhaps.
Fat, shabby, and an employee of the local council, Mr. L. Prosser is a direct male-line descendant of Genghis Khan. Mind you, he has no idea of this, and instead wonders why he has uncomfortable visions of pillaging houses and putting spears in people. One of the last two remaining members of the human race, we see Arthur enjoying what may have been his last cup of tea before he was spirited away from his doomed planet. His future looming uncomfortably in the kitchen cabinet of our bathrobe-clad hero. vagabond of the spaceways, and a nattily dressed one at that. Ford is a roving researcher for that wholly remarkable book, The Hitchhiker'S Guide to the Galaxy. This Beetlejuicean was stranded on Earth for 15 years, eventually befriending Arthur Dent and saving him from the planet's destruction. What can be said about this two-headed, three-armed, pan-galactic, gargle-blaster drinking, egotistical, adventurous, terribly handsome, spaceship-stealing, pleasure-seeking president of the galaxy that hasn't been said in this very sentence? Not much, really. Beautiful, charming, devastatingly intelligent, the former Tricia Macmillan had the good fortune to meet Zaphod Beeblebrox at a party on Earth. She subsequently ran off with him to the spaceways. After all, with degrees in maths and astrophysics, it was that or the dole queue again come Monday. With an intellect the size of a planet, there are very few tasks in the universe that would challenge Marvin's abilities. His depression knows no limits, nor does his desire to complain about it. He has been known to cause other robotic brains to kill themselves in an effort to relieve the stress of listening to Marvin complain. Fabled in myth and story, the planet of Magrathea was the planet builder to the galaxy. For untold millennia, Magrathean hyperspatial engineers worked to form dream planets for the galaxy's richest beings. One of these engineers is Slarty Bartfast. He sculpted the fjords on the ultimate organic computer commissioned by the mice, Earth. Benji and Frankie Mouse are actually part of the race that commissioned the building of the ultimate computer known as Earth. Keeping tabs on their eons-long program, they lived on Earth with Tricia Macmillan, also known as Trillian, before the Vogons destroyed it. They travelled with her to Magrathea before revealing their identities. Prostetnic Vogon Jeltz of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council, a particularly obnoxious representative of his foul race, had no qualms about destroying the Earth and its 4 billion plus inhabitants. He is especially fond of writing poetry, the hearing of which is the universal epitome of the old cliché, a fate worse than death. In an effort to finally discover the meaning of life, the universe and everything, a race of pan-dimensional beings created the supercomputer Deep Thought. After 7.5 million years, the answer arrived. It was the privilege of the two custodians of the computer, Dunqual and Fouche, to be the first to hear the awesome answer. 42.
Kismet.
Under the entry of alcohol, The Hitchhiker'S Guide to the Galaxy gives the following information. It says that the best drink in existence is the Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster. It says that the effect of drinking one is like having your brain smashed out by a slice of lemon wrapped around a large gold brick. The Hitchhiker'S Guide says that a towel is the most massively useful thing an interstellar hitchhiker can have. It has great practical value on the desert world of Kakrafoon for use as a sail whilst going down the slow, heavy River Moth. It can also be used in moments of danger and when confronted by the bug-blatter beast of Tral. The Hitchhiker'S Guide also says that a towel has an immense psychological value. For some reason, if a strag, a non-hitchhiker, discovers that a hitchhiker has his towel with him, he will automatically assume he's also in possession of all the other things vital to interstellar travel. Having just been dropped off by a strag after hitching a ride, Ford Prefect is the envy of the local aliens. Ford is jealously seen by the locals as a Hoopy Frood, a really amazingly together guy who really knows where his towel is. In this instance, it's around his waist, and a good thing too, given Ford's level of inebriation. The Hitchhiker'S Guide considers the babelfish to be probably the oddest thing in the galaxy. It feeds on brainwave energy received from those around it. It absorbs all unconscious mental frequencies from this brainwave energy and then excrete into the mind of its carrier a telepathic matrix, thereby becoming a universal translator. The Encyclopedia Galactica defines a robot as a mechanical apparatus designed to do the work of a man. The marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation defines it as your plastic pal who's fun to be with. Look at the card's front and draw your own conclusions. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy defines the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, pictured here, as a bunch of mindless jerks who'll be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. According to a future edition of the Encyclopedia Galactica, that's just what happens. One of the stranger guide entries relates the experiences of Vit Vujicic, a brilliant academic who, after drinking pan-galactic gargle blasters with Zaphod Beeblebrox, became obsessed with the problem of what had happened to all the biros, ballpoint pens, he'd bought over the years. After visiting the galaxy's major centers of biro, ballpoint pen, loss, Vit Vujicic came up with the following popular theory. Somewhere in the cosmos was a planet populated by biroid life forms, where unattended biros would make their way, slipping quietly through wormholes in space. Vit Vujicic's quaint theories about a living ballpoint pen planet led to his subsequent institutionalization. Of course, this doesn't explain the mysterious 60,000 Altarian dollars paid yearly into Zaphod's Bratis Vogon bank account, and of course, his highly profitable second-hand biro business. It was clear from the beginning that this cover would have to feature Arthur Dent, the destruction of Earth, and Vogons. It was up to artist Steve Lealoha and designer Dean Motter to figure out how to do it. Then, working from Steve's tight sketch, airbrush artist Steve Fassner executed the finish. In designing this volume, space was left on the page opposite Douglas Adams' intro for a piece of full-page art by Steve Lealoha. It's a variation on the cover theme, showing Arthur and Ford at the beginning of their extraordinarily improbable misadventures. At least they've got their towels. Volume 2 has the only scene-oriented cover in the trilogy of graphic novels. It's hard to show action on the bridge of a spaceship, but artist Steve Lealoha's combination of incoming missiles and reactions to it by the crew did the trick. Each of the reactions is true to its character. Originally, page 2 of this issue was the first page of art, but it was felt that a stronger image was needed to kick off the middle part of the tale. Artist Steve Lealoha came up with this serene shot of the Bridge of the Heart of Gold and offered colorist Lovern Kinderzieski 2 different color guides for it. Parts of both were used. This was the hardest cover of the trilogy for Steve Lealoha to conceive. He did 6 different sketches for it, but was unhappy with all of them. Through conversations with the series editor, a part of one of the sketches was expanded into this cover composition. Airbrush artist Steve Fassner executed the shadow effects perfectly. Great guys, Ford Prefect says about the Dentrassi. They're the best cooks and the best drinks mixers, and they don't give a wet slap about anything else. They are regularly employed on Vogon starships, Vogons being one of the races who don't mind hair in their food. The noisy, reddish, unsettlingly robust Vlahurg are one of the most frightening races in the galaxy. Never say to a Vlahurg, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, for in their tongue, it is the most dreadful insult imaginable. Dangerous, warlike, extremely unpleasant looking, low, gaze in fear and wonder at the angular, vapor-shrouded forms of the mighty Cagunfront race. Constantly surrounded by a thick cloud of green, sweet-smelling steam, these beings are sworn enemies of the equally unattractive Vlahurg race. The Alpha Centaurians, as in small furry creatures from, for the times when men were real men, women were real women, and these happy little beings transcended troubles, trials, and tribulations. Yet, in today's torrid times, try to track a tiny total of these poor forgotten cute creatures. Behold the mighty planet makers! They who suck matter through white holes in space and form it into dream planets for the rich and influential. The architects of oceans, the shapers of worlds, the etchers of fjords. All hail the mighty matter-morphing Magratheans. Having been picked up by the Heart of Gold, Ford and Arthur are taken to the bridge by Marvin. But when Ford tries to introduce Arthur to Zaphod Beeblebrox, his semi-cousin, Arthur interrupts, saying they've already met. Despite the extra arm and second head, Arthur recognises Zaphod, or should we say, Phil. Arthur recalls first meeting Zaphod at a party 6 months earlier in Islington. Zaphod had gate-crashed the party, at which Arthur had been particularly taken by a girl he'd spent all evening trying to speak with. She was beautiful, charming, and devastatingly intelligent. At last, Arthur had gotten her all to himself. As Arthur was in the middle of picking up a spectacular-looking girl at a party, Zaphod Beeblebrox cut in on Arthur's time and swooped the girl away, saying, "Hey doll, is this guy boring you? Why don't you talk to me instead?" And that was the last Arthur was ever to see of this particularly charming girl. Or so he thought. Zaphod Beeblebrox used an old but still potent pickup line to steal Tricia McMillan away from Arthur at an Islington party. "I'm from a different planet." Trite, but it worked. Trillian, still with Zaphod aboard the Heart of Gold, readily admits that Zaphod's offer to travel the cosmos was better than looking for a job. The blazing sun, the cooling surf, and who better to spend it with than Marvin, your own chronic depressive plastic beachside pal. Here we're treated to a lovely surfside view as he tests the waters for his future ex-owners. Marvin, on saving the universe, "I think you ought to know I'm not feeling heroic at all. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and it's save the beautiful space princess Marvin, overthrow the evil despot Marvin. It's quite depressing, really." Nothing ends a children's birthday party faster than an appearance from Marvin, the paranoid android. Just paint a happy face on Marvin, let him tell his horrid tales of depression, and start counting the presents and empty chairs. Marvin's brain. He's always saying that it's the size of a planet, and these scientists tried to prove it physically impossible. Later, as this unlucky couple picked through the remains of their lab equipment, Marvin was heard to say, "I never said it was a large planet." Marvin's held many jobs throughout his existence, and they've all depressed him terribly. In this occupation, as the master of ceremonies at a dreadfully posh nightclub/restaurant, he was fired after far too many patrons pleaded for food poisoning during his act. Despite the title, Vogon constructor fleets do not construct anything. What they will do, and what they are better at doing than most semi-civilized races, is demolish a planet totally, completely, And absolutely, here the destruction of Earth is reviewed by Prostechnik Jeltz, whilst his bored lieutenants decompose their latest poems. One of the more desirable jobs that a young Vogon might aspire to is that of spaceship guard. It affords the opportunity to wear the steel and leather uniform of the service and the low-slung ray gun, and to give vent to massive fits of shouting. Here the young students practice shouting, "Resistance is useless." Capellan jeweled crabs are prized the galaxy over for their dazzling beauty. Vogons prize them for their 2-week-old rotted fish taste, and the popping and squealing sounds they make when roasted live over an open fire. Sounds that remind the Vogons of their poetry. The medieval planet. Whatever time period you desire to live in, Magrathea is perfectly happy to provide it for you. Take, for example, this fantastic reproduction of a primitive Earth era. Medieval aficionados are cheerfully supplied with an abundance of fire-breathing dragons to meet all chivalristic needs. Planet of Fish. Perhaps you're interested in a planet that truly brings out the predator in you. Magrathea is only too willing to stock an entire planet chock full of prey for your hunting and spectating pleasure. The Cow Planet. Might the terrain of your brand new planet be slightly less important than its inhabitants? No problem. With the greatest of ease, Magrathea can populate your newly formed planet with the species and gender of your choice, with any and all requested genetic alterations. Planet of Bad Taste. Whatever your tastes, Magrathea can cater to you. We are not proud. From beaches strewn with garishly coloured precious stones, to the largest undulating red mountain, to the smallest vulgar silver tassel, Magrathea is here for you. Naked women on parachutes, optional. Before racing around the galaxy in the stolen heart of gold, Zaphod Beeblebrox ran for galactic president. In an impressive display of improbability, he was elected. However, Zaphod did not run because he wanted to be president. The actual reason is far more sinister and can only be found in the restaurant at the end of the universe. Slarty Bartfast, a hyperspatial planetary sculptor from Magrathea, was commissioned by the mice to partake in the construction of Earth, the ultimate computer that would identify the question to the answer 42, thus revealing the ultimate secret of life, the universe and everything. He was especially fond of the fjords. On hindsight, bringing the mice along was a good idea, but just you try explaining it to a future galactic president when he's impatient to get off the planet. His space speeder is double parked and he's got a pending appointment to have extra extremities added. The life of a field researcher for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is consistently full of wonder. Here, Ford Prefect manages to hitch onto an oddly familiar and staggeringly expensive looking means of transportation. I just wanted to come back at the end of this video to say thank you for watching. This video was interesting to research, record and put together, not to mention a whole lot of fun. As for thoughts on the card set in general, well, it is what it is, isn't it? I mean, there are so many different forms that Hitchhiker's takes, not all of them are going to be stellar. As with the comics, maybe if more care had been taken with the source material, they'd be better. But I conclude that the trading card set shall be remembered as harmless. Well, mostly harmless. Given the relative nicheness of this collection, the cards themselves as collector's items on sites like eBay, they command rather modest prices. In fact, I saw a whole retail box of them going for about 20 quid. So if anyone would like to sponsor an Ashen-style unboxing video as a future project, then streamlabs.com/mankp. It's always an option. Let's see if we can get a whole set of them from just one box. Once again, thank you to everyone who watched this. If you're watching this on its premiere, being Towel Day, stay hoopy, fruits. And I hope you have your towel with you. And also, don't forget to join me later on this channel for a Douglas Adams themed edition of The Pub Stream, where we will be discussing Adams's work, life, the universe, and probably everything. A massive shout out to my patrons: Cryptic, Eden, Inked and Pricked, Kaz, Crunchy Karma, Little Ease, Mess the Moose, Opinionated Scotsman, Sasha M, and Spoonie. I have more Douglas Adams related content on its way, and much more planned for the future on this channel. So stay tuned. And finally, so long, and thanks for all the fish.